good to see everyone after we canceled our meeting in March. And I think we're in for a unique opportunity today, and that we have a guest speaker. So I'm delighted that Catherine, who's chair of the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Math Committee on Enhancing Coordination Between Land Grants and Colleges, has joined us. And I know she's got some information to share today. So we'll probably spend much of today's meeting focused on that effort and maybe some conversation that will follow. So we'll do that. Jen, I know we'll get our roll call captured based on all the little squares on the screen, and looks like we've got a good number of squares on the screen today, so that is great to see. And I believe, if I understand, that we're going to get a request to do some work based on the draft information that Catherine's going to present. As I understand, Chris Pristos would like our group to make recommendations on how the experiment station section, SCOP, should respond to the committee's request for information. So please do pay attention. As I said, I think we're likely to get an ask to do some work on this. So Catherine, let me give you the floor, and I assume you'll be able to share anything presentation-wise on the screen that's needed. So the floor is yours. And again, thank you for joining us.
That's terrific. And thank you so much, Bernie. And in fact, Robin will be sharing some slides. So if you could make her a co-host so that she can share the slides, that would be great. But meanwhile, I'll get started with my comments as those slides are coming up. And so thank you again for inviting the two of us to come speak with you today. We're working on a project that is very near and dear to my heart, to be sure. And that is a project that was commissioned actually by the legislature in the annual budget process to look at ways in which we can further enhance coordination and collaboration across the entire land grant system. And this is meant seeing the land grant system in a very positive light. It's about how can we further create synergies, reduce barriers, and actually function more like a system than as a federation, so to speak, where we've really got seamless work across the entities. And so the reason that Robin and I are here today are to inform you of this project that we're working on, and to ask for your help in responding to some preliminary work that we are going to post on our website, and to get your feedback on that in the process of preparing our report. So if I could have the next slide, please, Robin. So the statement of our task for this particular project, a blue ribbon panel was appointed by the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, and asked to prepare a report that recommends specific actions to help enhance the success and the impact of activities across our land grant institutions of the land grant system. And the specific asks were to come up with suggestions for reducing barriers, particularly to effective coordination across institutions, to help foster very impactful and effective collaboration, and then to recommend some processes that land grant institutions can use to not only capture those successes, but to share them and to really magnify those successes, those outcomes, and the impacts of our joint projects. So if I could have the next slide, please. And so a little bit of background and a little bit of context for this particular project. Again, the vision really is for us to be thinking very holistically about our land grant institutions as a system. And the question is, can we further enhance, and that's important, the impact and the effectiveness of land grant universities as a unified network of research, education, and extension. In the legislation, there was a specific mention of ensuring that we include the 1890s institutions under consideration. We're also, of course, including the 1994 institutions as well. So across the full spectrum of our land grant institutions. And the thing is that it's clear that as we face what have often been referred to as the wicked challenges of today, the scale and the scope of our challenges, from very regional, local to much larger scale, requires that we put a range of strategies together to achieve our missions, from those which are focused on our local communities to those that are focused on our state, our nation, and beyond. And of course, the challenge always is to communicate to all of those, including our elected officials, the impacts and the values of the value, I should say, of our land grant institutions. And so that's a bit of the background and why this land grant, this blue ribbon panel was commissioned. And so now I'd like to turn things over to Robin to go a little further. So Robin, if you would, please.
Okay, hold on a second. Why is this not? It's odd. Oops, there we go. For those who don't know me, my name is Robin Shane. I'm the director of the Board on Agriculture and Natural Resources at the National Academies. And I am kind of the primary support person for the committee that Catherine chairs, and we're calling it the Blue Ribbon Panel. That's because the origins of this project were a piece of legislation in last year's Omnibus Appropriations Act, requesting the Undersecretary of REE with a small amount of funds going to NIFA, actually, to implement a Blue Ribbon Panel to look at the long history of the land grant institutions in the successes of U.S. agriculture, and to look forward, basically, to the challenges that are novel that we're facing as a nation. And to tell you the truth, the language was somewhat fuzzy. There was a House committee report that went along with it that was quite, in some ways, is potentially far-reaching, and talked about a new architecture for the land grant system, and all of which immediately made me pale a little bit when I was first approached by Parag Chitnis, and at the time the NIFA director, and Carrie Castile. So they called me up and basically said, would the National Academy of Sciences put together a blue ribbon panel to fulfill this legislative language? And in discussing this with them, we thought that it needed to be anchored to something that was in past experience to draw on. And instead of just kind of opening the door wide open to any idea of what the land grant system should be doing, we thought, well, let's build on the successes of the system. And so the statement of task for the study is further elaborated by saying that the committee will look at the multi-state projects and the CAP grants and any other initiatives that seem appropriate, but taking those as sort of case studies and examples, look at, what is the opportunity? What does collaboration enable one to do? What are the sort of the pros and cons, the limitations of interinstitutional projects? And consider the factors that contribute to the efficiency, the ease and transparency in reporting. And that goes to documenting the collective progress of the system, which is mentioned in this House report, because it seems as though the legislation is asking for a way to show the value of collaborative activities of the land grant system. And of course, everybody reports their progress reports in different ways, but how do you bring this all together to inform different kinds of individuals, like a legislator, other policymakers, maybe it's people out there in the venture capital world, the public, et cetera? How do you let them know about the progress that is made, the impact that is made? And so we also included in the statement of task this term, develop a framework of principles, which when we're dealing with something, sometimes at the academies, it's a little bit fuzzy. We'll use this language, develop a framework of principles around this concept of coordination and collaboration across the land grant system that in some ways, just to give you an idea of it, there are some sort of structural elements of what this looks like. There are dynamic elements of, what kinds of activities go on, what is the barriers and the drivers of this kind of activity, what are the ingredients to success, et cetera. So it's really for this committee to kind of say, all right, we're going to take a look at this whole thing, this collaboration, coordination, and see if we can tease out some major lessons from it. And again, unlike other academy studies, which normally a committee would be formed, go and hold some information gathering meetings, deliberate in private, and then put out a report, we're using a novel process of the academy. It's called a workshop-based study in which the committee or the Blue Ribbon Panel will actually reveal some of its deliberative thinking to the stakeholders, which include all of you and others, so that it can get input into its final report. And so the plan is for, as written in the statement of tasks, the committee was to develop this framework of principles and share it with stakeholders at a multi-day virtual workshop. So the committee itself thought that there ought to be another step prior to the workshop, and that was to develop kind of a written document that could be commented on by stakeholders, across the nation and beyond. Because not everybody is going to be able to take time to participate in a workshop. Some of the workshop sessions may be tailored to specific groups. And so the committee, very much felt like we needed to be able to get everybody from a junior faculty member to some producer who doesn't have time to be part of a workshop. And so soon we're going to be posting, and actually we're waiting for the committee's sign off on the final language, 17 at this point, preliminary observations that are very brief, but I think that will be recognizable to everybody on this Zoom call. And they're going to be posted on the National Academy's press website. And let me go to the next slide if this thing's working, and I'll give you some more information from there. So the timeline is this group got started in last November. It's had maybe 6 full committee meetings and then 2 more meetings broken out as subgroups. And the plan now is to have these preliminary observations posted for comment. And I want to kind of highlight that because this is where we really do need your input and help. Not only are we going to need, to the extent you determine you want to do it as a collective, your collective comments, but we need your help in pushing the fact that this is going to be posted out to the land grant community as far as as wide as we possibly can. And that, can be a tall order. I think we're going to end up having these posted for about 3 weeks. And this is going to provide input to the committee for a virtual workshop for which we haven't exactly set the date, but we're thinking it's going to be the end of May or the beginning of June, in which probably there's going to be a deeper drill into some topics that kind of resonate with people depending on the feedback that we get, followed by preparing a report. And then, like all Academy reports, they have to go through an anonymous peer review to ensure that the group has sufficiently built its arguments for its recommendations and has substantial evidence for its conclusions. And we're thinking that that's probably going to be done getting through the report review process by the end of July, and hopefully get put out to the public and to the sponsors with some webinars that are announcing kind of the findings and recommendations of the committee in early August. So I think I've just got one more slide, and that, of course, is to tell you who, in fact, is on this blue ribbon panel. Of course, Catherine is the chair. A diversity of individuals from 1862s, 1890s, one individual from a 1994, folks who are not actually at land-grant universities, people from the private sector, a commissioner of agriculture, somebody from the venture capital world. And so we've had a pretty diverse positions within that group, and I've had very robust discussions. And I think that is about the end of my presentation. So I'm going to turn it back to Catherine at this point to make any final comments before we open it up for questions.
So thank you, Robin. And so I hope we've laid out for you our objectives and the call for help to have some input and some response to this framework that our committee has been putting together. And as Robin said, we should be posting these materials to the NIS website later this week is the hope. And so at this point, the two of us would be happy to answer any questions that you might have or any comments that you might have.
Can you maybe reiterate the time to get the comments back? I mean, it's a tough time of year.
Yes, it is. As they say, as T.S. Eliot said, April is the cruelest month, and it's so true. And so we are aiming to post them this week, and we're hoping to get feedback within about 3 weeks of posting. I will say that it's 17 essentially statements, more or less. And then with area comment boxes is the way it will be structured. So people can do as much or little in those boxes as they wish.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that you'll find that some of them, I was trying to grab my copy of the latest draft, but I'm not really breaking any rules by sharing. The very first one of them is that the committee observes that there is a long history of very excellent and substantial amount of coordination and collaboration going on now. And so that's number one. So, and so there are some that you will, and I think we can certainly share, Catherine, kind of the nature of these. I mean, it's like 4 sections, and I'd say the largest section really has to do with the barriers. Because there's just a kind of a diversity of different kinds of barriers that run from administrative hurdles to sort of I might call something like a legacy cultural bias towards singular investigator investigations, single PI investigations versus the value apportioned to collaborative activities, that kind of thing. And some are just the capacity of individuals to participate in these, and the different ways that institutions support their faculty in being involved in these. So that's just kind of a glimpse. There's another section that goes towards the notion of the science and what it is that how science has changed, how the challenges may have changed, or the way of looking at problems has changed. For example, it's not enough. I think this group would agree that it's maybe not enough to say, hey, we need to do research, for example, to see how we can increase the yields of a crop, but you need to know whether you can increase those yields without making environmental damage and taking into account climate change and what are the socioeconomic impacts on the producer and the community. So these questions tend to have more of a systems aspect to them now, and which may itself kind of lend itself to collaboration and coordination if you're talking about looking at things across different geographies, et cetera. So it would be great to have input on how the community sees those kinds of changes and the need for collaboration because the science is kind of driving that. Let's see.
So we're hoping then to send the links to you, and we're hoping that you'll further magnify them and distribute them out to your colleagues and your peers.
Shivu, I think looked like you maybe had a question.
Yeah, I think Catherine just answered my question. That was my question. You know, can we get a link when you post it online? So it looks like you will send us a link. Great.
Absolutely. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, we will send you a link and a blurb that you can use to communicate with everyone as to what is this thing and hopefully why it's important. The audit people are, even members of the committee are like, who's the audience for? Because it's the vagueness of it as it was handed to us means that you could go way down into the weeds of who is a good leader of a collaboration, for example. Are they somebody who's got a good personality and they get along with others and they know how to make sure everybody's heard and they're good or have good organization? And those things are actually pretty valuable. Those interpersonal skills, when you think about it, whether collaboration works or not, in some ways hinges on how well people work together. So that's not unimportant. But and then on the other extreme, is this a question that is best addressed by a very broad collaboration? And how do you decide, and who decides who's in and who's out? And are you even aware of the expertise across the land grant system? And I'll just pick up the point that Catherine mentioned about the legislation specifically called out the 1890s as, especially including the 1890s. And this, Catherine may have had a better sense. You have some intel with the office of where the legislation came from, but perhaps a year ago, thinking back over a year ago, the moment was there for thinking of issues of social equity and maybe the disparity in resourcing for collaboration amongst institutions. And so one discussion that the committee had basically, it revealed to me that, sometimes the 1862s know who their partners are, but they're just not aware that many of the people who are in 1890s, were educated in 1862s, and they're now trying to anchor the 1890s, and they have the same faculty mentors as some of the people are at the 1862. So maybe trying to figure out how to strengthen those relationships would be, part of this picture.
So a question about the feedback you're seeking. So ideally, is this coming from individuals, groups, organizations? So I guess it's worth thinking about putting this together. Would you prefer it to be a set of feedback from this committee versus individuals, or tell us more?
So that's a terrific question. And the answer, not to be the slightest bit flippant, is all of the above. And what we'd like to have happen is there'll be a place to describe who it is that's doing the information. We imagine that given the short timeline, it's probably going to be most effective for people to do this individually or independently, as opposed to being able to gather and gain consensus across wide groups, but that's fine. So we're looking for broad input. We will take into account how the people modify themselves, but it's fine if in fact, lovely if it's a group, but we'll take all data.
Other questions for Catherine and Robin? Well, hearing none, again, thank you so much both for joining us this afternoon. Let us maybe have a little bit of a conversation as you get off to see if we can get organized enough to be a little bit responsive as a group representing the Science and Technology Committee. And certainly we will encourage our colleagues and others to weigh in on this as well once we see the link and the charge. So thank you.
Well, thank you. We really appreciate it and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you all. Nice to meet you.
So Brett, if I understood a bit, Chris was expecting that